The human stepped cautiously into the grand hall of the alien palace, his boots echoing softly against the smooth metallic floor. The walls glowed with a soft blue light, and strange symbols moved across them. As if alive, every step he took made the hairs on the back of his neck rise, for he knew the palace was not empty, and the eyes of many unseen watchers followed him. He had crossed deserts and space storms, and survived alien creatures that would have killed most humans to reach this place, but now, standing at the threshold of the throne room, he felt a new kind of fear, one that was not about danger, but about the unknown. He had never met the princess in person, only through distant reports and old stories whispered by those few aliens who remembered the old times. His heart beat fast, yet he walked forward with a calm that he did not entirely feel. The large doors of the throne room opened silently, revealing a vast space filled with light and shadow. The princess sat at the center upon a throne that seemed grown from crystal and metal together. Her eyes were like molten gold, and she observed him as though weighing his soul. The air seemed to thicken, and the human's breath caught in his throat. He remembered the stories of her wrath and the legends that said no one dared speak her true name for decades. Yet he knew it. He had learned it from a hidden scroll buried beneath ruins on a desert planet, a secret name that had been whispered once and nearly forgotten. He stepped forward closer to the throne, the floors reflecting his image, and the light creating strange patterns around him. He took a deep breath and let the name escape his lips softly, almost as a whisper. His voice barely carried, but it was enough. The princess froze, her eyes widened, and her golden gaze locked onto him. Her hands gripped the armrests of her throne, and the guards who had been standing rigid at the sides hesitated. Their eyes flicked between the human and the princess. Confusion rippled through the room like a wave. The human felt the tension in the air, as if time itself had slowed. The princess had not reacted like this to anyone for centuries, and now here he was whispering the truth of her identity. The memory of her childhood flashed through her mind, the days when she had been hidden from enemies, the nights when she had been alone, and the few trusted ones who had known her name. She had never expected anyone to remember it. She had never expected anyone from a distant planet to know the human held his ground, his gaze steady, his posture calm, though inside his heart raced. He had taken a risk by speaking the name, yet he felt it was necessary. He needed her attention, and he needed her to understand. He was not a threat. The silence in the room was heavy as the princess processed what had been said. The guards shifted slightly, unsure of whether to attack or stay their positions. The human took another step forward and met her gaze directly. There was a subtle recognition in her eyes, a flicker of curiosity mixed with caution. She tilted her head slightly and spoke her first words in centuries, asking him how he knew. Her voice was soft and strange to human ears, melodic and resonant, and it carried authority, yet there was vulnerability hidden within. The human chose his words carefully. He spoke of the scroll he had found, the story of her childhood, the forgotten planet where she had been hidden, and how he had pieced together fragments of old legends. His words were slow, deliberate, and filled with respect. He did not reveal everything, but he gave enough for her to see that he was honest. The princess listened silently, her golden eyes never leaving his face. Every movement of her body betrayed a battle within herself between disbelief and cautious trust. The guards remained tense, waiting for a signal, yet none came. The human noticed a small smile barely visible on the edge of her lips. She was amused or perhaps impressed, but he could not be sure. He continued speaking, telling her about the dangers he had faced to reach her, the storms he had crossed, the creatures that had hunted him, and the worlds he had visited. He wanted her to know that he had come not for power or riches, but out of curiosity and respect for her and her people. The princess leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing not in anger, but in focus. As she tried to understand him, she asked questions about the scroll and the details of the story she had long forgotten. He answered carefully, adding details only someone who truly knew her past could answer. He avoided anything that would seem intrusive or threatening. He wanted to earn her trust. Slowly the palace seemed to hold its breath around them. The air shimmered, and the lights on the walls flickered in rhythm with the tension. The human felt it, as well, a pulse of energy running through the halls, as though the building itself was judging him. The princess finally spoke again, this time her voice firmer. She asked why he had remembered her name, and he replied that some names are worth remembering, that some histories should not be lost. He saw her eyes soften slightly, and a spark of recognition appeared. Her posture relaxed just a fraction, and she signaled to the guards to lower their weapons. The human felt a surge of relief, but he kept his composure. He knew this was only the beginning. She had not yet fully trusted him. The princess rose from her throne and walked down the steps toward him. Her movements were graceful and deliberate, and every eye in the room followed her. The human stood still, waiting for her to speak. She stopped a few meters away and looked at him closely. Her golden gaze searched his face, as though trying to read his soul. Then she whispered his true name, the one that had been known only to those few who had seen her as a child. The human froze in response. He had not expected her to know. He nodded slowly, acknowledging her recognition, and a silent understanding passed between them. The guards relaxed their stance completely, and the tension in the hall eased slightly. The princess motioned for him to follow her deeper into the palace. The human obeyed, stepping carefully over the reflective floors and moving toward chambers he had only heard of in stories. They passed through halls filled with strange artifacts and glowing symbols that seemed alive. The princess occasionally glanced at him, her expression unreadable, at times cold, at times curious. He noticed glimpses of portraits depicting her as a child and as a young ruler, scenes of past celebrations and battles. Her voice finally broke the silence. She asked him questions about his world, about humans, about the stars beyond our galaxy. The human answered patiently, describing the planets he had visited, the ships he had flown, and the civilizations he had seen. He made sure to speak respectfully, not to seem arrogant. The princess listened intently and occasionally smiled faintly. She revealed small pieces of herself, stories of her childhood, of hidden tutors and secret lessons, and of the loneliness she had endured for centuries. The human absorbed every detail, understanding that trust was fragile, and he had to proceed carefully. The air grew warmer as they entered a chamber filled with soft light and strange devices. The princess stopped and turned to him fully, her golden eyes serious. She asked him if he would help her with a task, one that required discretion, intelligence, and courage. The human nodded without hesitation, knowing that this could change everything between them. She smiled faintly, a small acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. He realized that speaking her true name had opened a door that few humans would ever reach. The princess led him to a window overlooking the palace gardens, vast stretches of alien flora glowing under twin moons and distant mountains. The human marveled at the sight, but kept his focus on her. She spoke of threats approaching from rival factions, how her kingdom had been threatened before, and how knowledge of her true name could be a key in her plans. He listened carefully, making mental notes of dangers and strategies. She asked him what he would do if faced with impossible choices, and the human responded honestly that he would do whatever was necessary to survive and to protect those who trusted him. The princess seemed to consider this for a long moment, then nodded approvingly. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of warmth in her gaze. She led him further into the palace chambers, showing him maps and relics, and explaining pieces of history that only a true ally would know. He absorbed the information like a sponge, realizing that his journey had only just begun. The princess paused at a door, her golden eyes fixed on him, and whispered once again her true name, this time with a tone that held challenge and curiosity. The human met her gaze and repeated the name silently to himself, committing it to memory and understanding its weight. She nodded faintly and stepped aside, allowing him to enter a room filled with ancient texts and glowing artifacts. The human knew that within this room lay secrets that could change the fate of her kingdom and perhaps the galaxy itself. He stepped in cautiously, aware that every action mattered, and that the bond with the princess was delicate, fragile, and could be broken by a single mistake. He felt the weight of history on his shoulders and the power of trust forming. Between them, the princess followed him in silence, observing every movement and waiting for him to show his intentions. The human took a deep breath and began to explore the artifacts and texts, carefully respecting their significance. He realized that knowledge was power and that he had been given a rare gift, the chance to witness history and influence its course. He looked at the princess and saw not only a ruler, but a being shaped by centuries of isolation, fear, and responsibility. He felt a strange connection, a bridge between worlds, and understanding that despite the differences, they could trust each other if he proved himself worthy. The princess finally spoke, breaking the silence. She asked him about his dreams, hopes, and fears, and the human answered honestly, revealing only what he thought was safe to share. She listened intently, occasionally nodding approvingly. Their conversation flowed naturally, forming a rhythm that neither had expected. He realized that speaking her true name had changed everything. It had unlocked doors and opened paths that had been sealed for centuries. The princess paused and looked at him with an unreadable expression. The human held her gaze, knowing that the palace was alive with watchers, but that in this moment it was only the two of them. The tension and curiosity between them created an invisible bond, one that promised challenges, dangers, but also understanding and perhaps friendship as they moved forward in a world full of mystery, secrets, and threats. And the human knew that this was only the first step in a journey that would test his courage, intelligence, and heart in ways he had never imagined. The human followed the princess through the inner chambers of the palace, the walls shimmering with strange lights and symbols that seemed to watch them as they passed. She led him to a room filled with maps and glowing devices that hummed softly under the twin suns. Their footsteps echoed faintly as they walked, and for a moment, the human felt as if he had stepped into another world. She turned to him, her golden eyes serious yet curious, and asked what he saw when he looked at her world. The human looked around at the alien technology, at the strange artifacts, at the portraits of rulers long gone, and replied that it was a world of history, of strength, of survival, and of beauty that he had never imagined. She seemed pleased with his answer, yet her expression remained guarded. He realized that gaining her trust required more than words. It required understanding, observation, and respect. She motioned for him to sit and pointed to a large map depicting distant planets and star systems. The human studied it carefully, noting patterns, routes, and locations that seemed familiar from his travels. She explained that rival factions had been seeking her kingdom for decades, and that only knowledge, courage, and alliances could protect her. She asked him what he would do if faced with impossible odds, and the human replied honestly that he would fight and survive using every resource available, and that he would protect those who trusted him. She nodded approvingly and explained that his knowledge of her true name gave him an unexpected advantage, a key that could open doors and disarm enemies if used wisely. The human felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had crossed galaxies to reach this moment, and now he understood that his journey was no longer about exploration, but about survival, trust, and strategy. The princess rose and led him to a balcony overlooking the palace gardens glowing softly under twin moons. The human marveled at the alien flora, the soft light reflecting off crystalline trees and luminescent flowers. She asked him what he felt seeing this world, and he replied that it was a place of wonder and danger, a place that deserved respect and protection. She smiled faintly at his words, a small warmth in her gaze that had been absent before. Their conversation flowed naturally as she asked about his world, the humans, the stars beyond, and he answered with care, honesty, and curiosity. She listened intently, occasionally leaning forward or tilting her head as if weighing his soul. The human realized that she had not been treated with such attention or patience for centuries. That realization deepened his respect for her and his understanding of the delicate bond forming between them. As the moons rose higher in the alien sky, the palace suddenly shuddered. The human and the princess exchanged a glance, and the guards moved swiftly toward the windows, their golden eyes scanning the horizon. The human noticed distant shapes approaching the palace. Ships or creatures he could not identify moving with speed and purpose. The princess spoke sharply, ordering preparations and strategies to be readied. The human observed her confidence calm in the face of danger and felt a surge of admiration and understanding that she was more than a ruler. She was a being shaped by centuries of trials and solitude. She gestured for him to join her in the strategy chamber, where maps and devices displayed the movement of the approaching threat. He studied them, carefully noting weaknesses, patterns, and possible routes of attack. She asked his advice, and he suggested strategies combining human ingenuity and observations from his travels. She listened intently, considering each word, and then nodded approvingly. The room buzzed with anticipation and tension. The human could feel the energy of history, past and present, converging. In this moment, the princess finally spoke softly, asking him if he would trust her with his life if the battle required it. The human met her gaze without hesitation and replied that trust was earned, and that in this moment he trusted her. The princess allowed a faint smile, the first true expression of warmth since he had entered the palace. He realized that speaking her true name had broken barriers and created a bridge between worlds and hearts. The first wave of the rival forces arrived, the palace shuddering under impact and alarms echoing through the halls. The human and the princess coordinated strategies, combining her advanced technology and his knowledge of tactics learned across galaxies. The palace shook again, but the bond between them strengthened as they moved with precision, skill, and courage. The human whispered her true name as a signal, and the princess responded immediately, a silent communication that allowed them to act as one. The guards followed their lead, and together they repelled the first wave. The sky outside glowed with energy blasts and strange explosions illuminating the palace in a surreal light. The human marveled at her ability to command fear, respect, and loyalty all at once. She moved with grace and purpose, issuing commands and countering threats. He realized that this was not just a battle but a test of trust and understanding, and that together they had become stronger than the sum of their parts. As the battle continued, they encountered a critical moment, a breach in the palace defenses and a formidable enemy. Entering the inner chambers, the human acted quickly, combining strategy and courage, guiding the princess to a position of safety and using his knowledge to counter the threat. She followed his lead, trusting his instincts and decisions for the first time, fully relying on him. The enemy was formidable, but the bond between the human and the princess allowed them to anticipate each other's moves and act in unison. They repelled the intruder using a combination of alien technology and human ingenuity. The princess paused, catching her breath, and looked at him, her golden eyes reflecting a mixture of awe, respect, and gratitude. The human nodded, acknowledging the trust and courage they had shared. She spoke softly, asking him what he had learned from the battle. He replied that trust, communication, and understanding were more powerful than any weapon.